Hey everybody, Jane here, and I have decided to start a new vlog. This is one I am pretty excited about, and it is going to be World War II adjacent books. So the first book I'm going to be picking up for this vlog is the graphic novel Mouse. It is one that has been on my TBR several times before. I just never seem to get around to it, and I am going to absolutely get around to it this time. So I'll let you know what I think of it once I finish it.
Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page, capturing life as soul spoken.
I finished Mouse, and I'm gonna volume 1. I did order volume 2. I am going to continue. I gave it a 4-star. So I think the story is important. It is a man talking to his father about his experiences during World War II as a Jew, and it's an intense story. I think that keeping it so close to what he was told exactly kind of hurts the story at times because it's a little hard to follow. You have a lot of asides, you have a lot of details about the father and the father-son relationship that I think get in the way of the actual part of the story I'm interested in, which was the father's lived experience. You also have the father having an accent, and so at times I really had to work at what he was saying. Now, I do believe Mouse is middle grade, and I can imagine some children having a hard time reading this book, not because of the content necessarily. There is some content, but it's World War II. You can't not have some content with that. It's the Holocaust. But just from an understanding and getting past the father's thick accent, I thought it was a lot of work to read. So I am interested to see what happens next. Like, obviously we know because of stuff that because the father is talking to his son, we know the father is a survivor. And also we have some other details that have already been revealed just kind of by default. Like, the father said, well, this is a thing. And so we know certain things. But otherwise, it was a good book, and I've really been enjoying it. Sorry for the less than perfect lighting. I am getting ready to go into work, and of course, I'm a night shifter. Now I am in a parking garage, so it's not as dark as it would be had I been out. But I just wanted to check in with you. I am taking a new book with me tonight, hopefully to start on my breaks, and that is Library for the War Wounded. My understanding is that this book is about a World War II veteran and his family. So I'm not entirely sure about much beyond that. That's kind of just what the cover says. But it's close enough to our World War II theme that I thought I would give it a try. I will let you know how it goes. All right, update time. I am about 30 pages in to the Library for the War Wounded. So I did not pay attention when I picked this up that it is a translation. I'm not sure what it is translated from, but I will tell you I'm having a little bit of a struggle sometimes with understanding certain things. I'm not entirely sure if it's translation. I don't know if it's maybe the way the story's told, but I'm still gonna try. But it's like in my brain that this may not be one I finish. We will see. So we have a character who so far the whole book has just been telling us about their parents. Their dad was the son of a single mom, and he was really scholarly, really into books. He was given an education because he was so smart. However, then he was sent to war. Their mother was not well loved growing up, and she was a nurse who met their father during the war. And I think, but I'm not sure, that the storyteller is a girl, but I am not 100% sure about that. So there's just a lot of things in the book that I personally am having trouble following. I don't read a lot of literary stuff, and this is coming off pretty literary. So I think between the genre of literary and it being a translation, and it also not really being a cohesive story and more of a, here's these cool people with cool, interesting backgrounds, so far, I am just struggling a little bit with following and appreciating all the stuff that's going on in this book. I do love the book club. The dad is really into books. Like, we are shown like a scene where he was at a neighbor's library and he started like copying pages of Ivanhoe because he didn't have access to books because he was so poor, but he loved books so much. So yeah, I don't want to say I'm enjoying it yet. I am fascinated by certain elements of it, but also really struggling. So that is where we are so far. I will give you an update once I read a little further and let you know if things are improving, if I feel like I understand it better, or if I'm even more in the weeds. All right, update time. I am almost on page 70 of Library for the War Wounded, and I've decided I'm not going to continue it. This is a fine book. It's just not a for me book. And I think if you like what the book is and what it's doing, it will really work for you. But it's a little bit literary for me. There's not much of a plot happening. It's just, it's a girl. She is a girl. I figured that out. It's a girl reminiscing about her father. She's not sure these memories are even accurate. There's a lot of discussion in the book about that of, the stepmother will be like, well, we don't know if that's really what happened or not. And the girl being like, well, Dad told me it was. So we have a lot of that. We have just, there's not really a plot. I'm not, the writing is fine. Most of the time I know what's going on. Sometimes I'm not sure. That could be a me issue. That could be a translation issue. I'm not entirely sure. Could be a little mixture of both. But most of the time I know what's going on. Most of the time it's cool, but I just don't care. And I'm not motivated to pick it up because there is nothing happening. It's just little vignettes of stuff about the kid's dad. The most recent one was they had taken in a soldier after the war who had lost an arm and a leg and had some mental issues after the war, presumably trauma, I'm not sure, and how the dad had let him stay at the convalescent home longer than they typically did. So typically when they were taking in soldiers, it was for a month, and this guy stayed for a year, and the dad was kind of like going around the paperwork because he was the manager, but he didn't own the place. So he had to kind of be like, okay, well, we're going to let this guy stay, but I've got to pretend that he's my assistant or make him my assistant maybe. And then in this whole thing, you're also getting all these memories that, they don't know if it's true. Our narrator is like, well, my aunt said this, but I don't remember it this way, so I think she's wrong. Things like that. And I think, again, I think if this is a kind of book you enjoy, you'll probably enjoy it. It's well written. I don't hate it. I just have no interest in picking it up, and I don't care. So, like, it has been probably a week, and I've only gotten another 20, maybe 30 pages from where I was last time I read it. And, like, I have to force myself to read it. Like, I have to, like, consciously be like, oh, yeah, I'm reading that book. I should pick it up. And that's just too much work for me right now for reading something that is supposed to be fun and enjoyable. And again, I don't hate this. I just don't care. And since I don't care, it's like, okay, I am fine putting this book down and never finding out any more about these people. If it was the only book I had available to me, and like I didn't have stacks and stacks and stacks of books that I wanted to read more than this, I could keep reading it. It would probably take me months to read, and I'd read it a little at a time, and at the end I'd be like, meh. It would probably be a 3-star read. But I am just not motivated to do that when there are so many other books that I really want to read instead. This just is not the best use of my reader time, which there is not enough of. So I will be DNFing this. A little bit sad about it, but we will get to move on to another book that I hopefully enjoy a lot more. So I have not great news. I started another book for this vlog and have already decided to DNF it. So sorry about that. But I'm going to tell you about it, and I'm going to tell you why I made this decision. So let's start with, the book is The Watchmaker from Auschwitz. And I was gifted this book by the author. And I do want to thank him for sending it to me. It's a well-written book. I think other people could really enjoy it. I think that I didn't have as much information as I maybe needed when I said that I would take the book to read. So this book, it doesn't tell you on the back cover really what this book is about. And so I kind of went in blind. And it is based on a true story. And during the first 2 chapters, we are following somebody who is on his way to becoming a member of the SS. And he is terrible, as you probably could guess. So within the first chapter, he kills a man and beats up a woman. The second chapter, he kills another guy. And I was not really realizing that was what we were going to be doing for this book. And of course, like I said, there's no information on the back. So I went to Goodreads and read some reviews. And apparently this whole book is following this guy and like seeing how this person who already had a propensity for evil and violence was molded by the Nazis to become a member of the SS and to be somebody who tortured and did terrible things to people in Auschwitz. And here's the thing, like, that might be a great book for somebody else to read. They might really be curious about the makings of that monster. I just am not. And within the first 2 chapters, I was already very uncomfortable. I wasn't enjoying what I was reading. I wasn't enjoying kind of being in this guy's head. it was not for me. Now, it could very well be for you. And I wouldn't steer people away. The writing is good. I did think it was well written. It was a little bit info dumpy in the very beginning, but then we started to have a little bit more in the moment storytelling. But I don't like this guy, and you're not supposed to like him. He's a villain. But I just, within the first 2 chapters, was like, I just don't think I want to follow this character throughout the rest of the book, because he's already awful, and I just don't want to sit here and read a book that's just about horrible people doing horrible things to other people. So yeah, after looking at the reviews on Goodreads, I've decided this is just not going to be a book for me. So back to the drawing board. I have, I think, 3 or 4 other books I want to read for this blog, or vlog. So hopefully those books are a little bit of a better match than this one or The Library of the War Wounded. So sucks that we're having a DNF so quickly, but it is what it is. All right, I'll be back and let you know about the next book I read. So I wanted to give you an update on My Enemy's Cradle. I have started this. I am maybe a little less than a quarter of the way in, maybe. But I'm really enjoying it so far. So far we have Cyrilla. I'm not really sure how to pronounce her name. It's Cyrla. And she is Jewish on her father's side and I believe Dutch on her mother's side. And her mother had passed away several years ago, but when Hitler came into power in this book, her father sent her to live with her maternal aunt, who is living in Holland, to keep her safe. And they're obviously hiding her half-Jewish heritage. So she has been with her cousin and her uncle and aunt living there for several years, and things are just starting to get bad in Holland. So they've just started to have notices appearing in shops that Jews are not welcome. And her paperwork, she doesn't have a lot of public paperwork. So like, people don't know that she's half Jewish, but they're trying to keep it a secret. And she doesn't go to a public school. She works at her uncle's shop, because all of those things kind of keep the government from knowing that she's there, knowing about her paperwork. So anyway, she does have a boyfriend. His name is Isaac, and he has been warning her throughout like the beginning of the book, like, hey, things are getting bad. Well, her cousin, who she is super, super close to, has come home and is pregnant. And her uncle is sending her cousin to this maternity home for women pregnant with German babies. And we haven't learned a lot about what that means. Isaac kind of hinted to our main character that like they're going to take these babies and give them to German families. So maybe it's like a fancy adoption thing. But the idea is to breed lots of German babies. It's very creepy. But anyway, so the cousin doesn't want to go to this maternity home. And so they are making plans, partly at Isaac's persuasion, to get out of the country, start a new life somewhere that hopefully, they'll have some protection from all the stuff going on in the world at that time under Hitler. So unfortunately, though, some stuff happens with her cousin, and I assume, based on the synopsis on the back of the book, that our main character, even though she's not pregnant at this time, is going to be taking her cousin's place at the maternity home and pretending to be pregnant to keep herself safe from all the stuff that's happening. So that's what I'm assuming is going to happen based on the synopsis of the book, but we're not quite there yet. But I have been really enjoying it so far. I'm having a good time, and I will check back with you once I'm a little bit further. Was this a wild ride? But in the best of ways. So I ended up giving it a 4-star. And I honestly wobbled between like a 4 and a 5 because I really enjoyed it a lot. I think the big thing that kept it from being a 5-star for me was there was some things that I think needed a little bit better developed or better pacing near the end of the book. But overall, this book was emotional and a good time, and it was really eye-opening to me and educational. So it talks about a part of the Nazi regime that is not really talked about very much, and that is these maternity homes that women were sent to. So basically, as they were trying to create like the master Aryan race, the Germans and the Nazis were like trying to convince all the women, married or not, to have all the babies so that they could, make the next generation of little soldiers. And per the author's note, like over 1,000 women were separated from their children, and most of them never found each other. So these women would get pregnant, sometimes by rape from the SS guards, sometimes by affairs with soldiers, sometimes by affairs with married men, sometimes, whatever circumstances. They would go to these homes and they would stay there during their pregnancy. They provided a lot of food and a lot of care for them. And then these women would have their babies, and the babies would get adopted into families. And, but also the babies were often in the orphanages there for a while. Like they weren't immediately taken. And actually in this book, at one point, our main character goes and visits one of these orphanages and is kind of appalled by the treatment of these babies. So yeah, this book was really good, really complex. There was a lot of things I didn't see. Some things I did. And I really, really enjoyed it. So if you're wanting kind of a different World War II book, I would say this is a good one to pick up. I would highly recommend it if you like World War II books, but are more looking for something about, not the death camps, not the Holocaust, not the American soldiers. But this was a very different take. And I think, especially as a woman, seeing the horrors, and I mean, horror is maybe a strong word, but to me, this is a horrific thing that was done to women, taking their children away from them, encouraging them to breed, trying to, basically brainwash them into having children, and also children who were not perfect being dealt with, whatever that means. We're not exactly told, but it's kind of implied, and it's just like, oh, like it's not a surprise these things happen. We know the Nazis were the bad guys, like really, really, really bad guys. We know. But yeah, I was not prepared for the full extent of kind of what was happening to the Aryan women in this group, and to everyday women who were, basically being encouraged to make babies as little teenagers to fuel the race, and then being like separated from their babies. It was definitely not as horrific as many things that I read about when I read World War II stuff, but I think this just hit really close to home, especially with some of the rhetoric that's happening politically right now about women's place as baby makers and concerns about the population and how women need to get it into gear and make some babies because, you know, we need to repopulate and crap. It just, it gives me the ick, particularly because of the world that we live in right now. All right, so I did finish this, really, really liked it. And like I said, I gave it a 4. My next read, I've already picked out, is going to be The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult. So, if you guys have not read Jodi Picoult, she is hard-hitting. So this, to my understanding, is about a woman who befriends a man and then finds out that previously he was, I believe, a member of the SS. And he is wanted for war crimes, maybe, and she's been asked to keep those secrets. But what he doesn't know is, I believe, she is related. She's Jewish, maybe, in some way. I think they said, when I was looking at the summary, that her grandmother was Jewish, maybe. So I haven't started this yet, but it is my next read, and I have been looking forward to it, although I'm sure because it's a Jodi Picoult, it's going to be a hard hitter. I expect to spend a lot of time reading it and crying. So I will check back with you when I've started to make progress on it. I am about 2/3 through The Storyteller, and I am really enjoying it. So, up to this point, we have Sage, and she is working third shift at a bakery making bread. So she was recently in a car accident where her mother died, and she has been left with some facial scarring. She also does not really like going out in public. She's not very social. And because of this accident, she has been going to a grief support group. At this group, she sort of makes friends with an elderly man who has recently lost his wife. The guy starts coming into the bakery to kind of hang out with her in the evenings while she is making bread. So he's a much older gentleman in his 90s, and she's, as I said, kind of a recluse. She also has a really unhealthy boyfriend situation happening that is kind of like a mini side plot. So anyway, this guy, they become close, and he admits to her that he was an SS soldier, and he knows that she is a Jew or of Jewish heritage. She's not a practicing Jew. Like, she is Jewish by heritage, but not by religion, if that makes sense. And he would like her to unalive him, I think, as sort of a penitence for the things he did while he was a member of the SS. So that's the beginning of the story. And instead of doing what he asked, she decides that the smart thing to do would be to call the FBI and be like, hey, there's a war criminal here. Maybe y'all should do something. Now, because it is a Jodi Picoult book, I was expecting that the vast majority after that point, because most of what I just told you is on the back cover. So I expected everything after that to be like a courtroom drama, because Jodi does that a lot. Like, a lot of her books have that courtroom drama. But so far as I am in this book, there has not been courtroom drama. And I don't totally know how I feel about that. I think it's working, and I understand why she didn't do it that way, but that is what I thought I was going into. So anyway, that was kind of the beginning of the book. So then we get the FBI agent who is called out, and he's like, listen, we got to get some evidence. And it would be really great if you could find somebody, or if we could find somebody who was a witness and saw this happen, saw him doing terrible things. So then the second part of the book, which I'm still kind of in right now, is flashbacks to a person, or to a Jewish girl who was going through all this stuff. A lot happens, and she ends up in Auschwitz. And I'm kind of in that section now where all the this stuff is happening. I am assuming that she's going to have interactions with this guy and going to be able to help the FBI prove that he is who he says he is and whether or not he should be punished for the things that he did. So it is interesting. Jodi Picoult often has multiple timelines, multiple POVs, a lot going on, and this book is no exception. There is so much happening, and it's working for me. She usually does it in a way I like, although that tends to be kind of a hard sell for me. And I like that she doesn't like break it up and do like a chapter of one and chapter of the other. There's a little bit of that because there is also another story within the story, which I don't love, but in this case, it works for me. So yeah, so I really am enjoying this, and I plan to finish it soon. I just love Jodi Picoult, so like I am not surprised I'm enjoying it, but it is really good. It is very heartbreaking, like seeing what people went through. On a side note, I did have like a thought while I was reading it that I wanted to share with you. So the part that I was just reading, the girls in Auschwitz and all the terrible things are happening. And my daughter yesterday had a conversation with me about kind of antinatalism and how so many people in her age group and, you know, people that she's heard don't want to have children because the world's a terrible place and there's going to be all this suffering, and they don't want to bring children into a world that potentially is going to go bad. And it just was so interesting to me that people who went through what the people at the concentration camps went through, so many of them later were able to get married and have children and have normal lives. I mean, these people went through basically literal hell, and yet they continued to survive and thrive. They beat the absolute worst suffering that can be inflicted on a person and went on to still have children and have families and have grandchildren. And it was such a beautiful thought of the human spirit and the human resilience. Like, this world has some terrible, awful things. And I think, especially for people who don't read a lot of history, the world right now seems pretty awful. If you're a student of history, I would argue that it's not all that bad, and we probably live in one of the better times to be alive. But I digress. That's probably a controversial statement. So, but, you know, especially as I'm reading this and reading the stuff that people survived. And again, Jodi Picoult does a lot of research. So I have every suspicion that a lot of the things, and I mean, obviously I'm reading a lot of World War II books. A lot of the things that happened in the concentration camps were just absolutely horrific. And just to see that people not only survived it, but thrived after and went on to, I mean, I guess I don't know how normal their lives were, but, you know, the media portrayals and everything is that people came out of it and went on to live lives. And in this book as well, the portrayal of things is that, you know, this survivor who they're talking to has had children, has grandchildren, has had a life outside of this terrible, horrible thing. I mean, this terrible, horrible thing that, you know, could have defined her. And granted, I get that this is fiction. I do. But still, I feel like that's probably what happened in a lot of cases. You know, I'm reading Mouse, or read the first volume of Mouse as well. And the father, you know, he went on, he got married, he had kids, and he has grandkids, and he has this life. And it's like, it just is such a beautiful thing that people who suffered so greatly could then go on and have lives and joy and babies. And then we have these modern attitudes a lot of times that are like, oh, well, things suck so bad. I don't understand why anybody would have babies. And yet people were having babies who had suffered literal hell. And like, they lived, they embraced life. So it was kind of a thought I had while I was reading this morning related to like a conversation I had last night with my kid. And it is horrible what happened, but I am so glad that people were able to survive and to not necessarily let that take everything from them if they survived. Like to go on and have normal lives afterwards. Obviously still affected by those things. I'm not in any way suggesting they aren't, but just I think we as humans sometimes don't realize how resilient people are. And also, like, I think especially people who aren't students of history don't realize how resilient people are. You know, throughout history, people have lived through some really horrific things, and they still were able afterwards to go on and live lives that had good moments. Maybe it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but like lives worth living. The people who lived through the Black Plague, the people who lived through the, Spanish Inquisition, the influenza, the things that happen in the world that are terrible, at the Holocaust. So many horrible things happen in history. And yet people are able to survive and thrive and live, and that is beautiful. So that's kind of my soapbox about that. But yeah, I will come back and let you know once I finish the book, my final thoughts on it. I finished The Storyteller, and I decided I would give it 4 stars. So there's a lot of things this book does really good and that I really enjoyed. However, there were a couple things, especially about the end, that I wasn't loving. The first was there is a twist. And I kind of had guessed what the twist was, but they do like, no, that's not what we're doing. This is what we're doing. And then they're like, just kidding. It is the twist you thought it was. But, and I think it was important for the plot that it was that way, but I didn't like it personally. I wish they'd have just gone with what the twist was and not tried to throw us off track. Because I didn't like it, I didn't think it worked, and like I knew why they did it, but I didn't like it. My other big complaint was I felt like this book had a really abrupt ending. So like you find out the twist and it ends. And I think like I could see where on a literary or thematic note it made sense with some of the other stuff happening in the story, but for me, I wanted more closure, and I didn't necessarily feel like I got all the closure that I wanted. I felt like this book could have ended a lot differently in a way that would have been more satisfying to me personally. But overall, I did like the book. It was a journey, it was a good story, and I think it brought up a lot of questions and interesting conversation pieces about who people are, who we think they are, the lies people tell other people and themselves, and questions about like the guy in the story. How evil was he? Was he a terrible person? Was he a man of his time? Was he somebody who genuinely tried to make up for the things that he had done? Or was he just awful? So yeah, it was a complicated story, and I like that. And Jodi Picoult likes to throw me the curveball. She likes to throw those books out that are complex and hard and make me think about stuff. So I do think this did this. There was a lot of things that didn't quite work for me, particularly about the end. But yeah, so I will let you know what my next read is. I think what I'd like to do is read the second volume of Mouse. I think that's going to probably be my next read. And then I have one other novel that I can't remember what it's called that I wanted to do for this blog. So I will probably let you know what that is after I finish Mouse. But I think I've already got Mouse from library. I have to double check my library stack and make sure like it didn't need to go back and have to be taken out again because this vlog has been over several months that I've been working on it. But I'm going to read Mouse, the second volume, and get back to you on my thoughts. Alright guys, so I wanted to give you an update. I finished volume 2 of Mouse, and I decided to give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I believe I gave the first volume, I can't remember if I gave it a 3 or 4. I liked this volume a little bit more. I found it a little bit more accessible. I'm not entirely sure why, because many of the things that I struggled with in the last book continued in this book, but maybe it's me, maybe it's getting used to the format, I'm not sure, but I liked volume 2 a lot better. So we are done with that. And I'm going to introduce you to the next book that I'm planning on reading for this vlog. And it is Frontlines. My understanding is this is a series about what if women fought in World War II. So I am excited to give this a try. I do have 3 of the books in the series. I think that's all there is, but I could be wrong. So I am probably only going to read this one for this vlog, but I may at some point read the sequels if I really enjoy this one. So, and if I don't, that's 3 books that are off my shelf, and at this point with my overflowing shelves, that's a win. Actually, like when I pulled this off my shelf, because of the way I have stuff stacked, like I had a little avalanche that I had to clean up. So yes, I definitely need to prioritize getting stuff off my shelf. But yeah, so I'm excited about this one. I had picked it up on a whim at the store not too long ago at Kixmix. It is one of their used books, and they had, like I said, 3 of them. So I am curious to give this a try. I hope I like it. I do believe this is YA, so YA can be hit or miss for me, but I'm hoping that this is a hit. I'll let you know when I read some, and we'll see. I thought I would take a brief moment to hop in and say hello while I am in the school pickup line. My kiddo is in esports today, so I'm waiting for her to come out. I am about halfway through Frontlines, and I am really enjoying this way more than I expected to. So we are following 3 characters. We have one girl who is from, I want to say, she's from a rural farming area, and she decided to enlist partly because her sister was unalived in the line of duty, and then also her best friend is enlisted. So she has recently, right before enlisting and heading out, fallen in love with a boy who is Air Force. So you've got a little bit of a love story there, but it hasn't detracted from the harder stuff, which is what I'm really interested in and enjoying. So far we've gone through basic training. So we have her. We have another girl who is an African-American girl who wants to be a medic, and she has enlisted because of poverty. Her father can no longer work, and she wants to be able to send her GI money to her parents to help them stay in their home. And I really am loving her story as well. She is really experiencing a lot of racism while in the Army, and not like everybody, all the girls are getting some sexism, but she's getting racism too. And she's made some very interesting points about, we are going to fight basically extreme racism in Nazi Germany, but we're still dealing with it in a slightly less genocidal way here. She's still having people talk about the things that used to occur. It's bad stuff. It's rough. So I'm loving her point of view. Then the last girl we have is a Jewish girl who is Army intelligence, or I don't know if she's Army, she's intelligence of some kind, and she's also signed up. So I am absolutely loving this book and cannot wait to continue. I finished Frontlines, and I ended up really enjoying this overall, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So it was probably even closer like a 4.5. I don't really give like decimal point ratings, but it was probably a 4.5. There were times in this book when I was like, ooh, is this a 5-star? And it wasn't quite a 5-star. And I think for me, a lot of that was just the subject matter. This isn't a book that I necessarily, I thought it was really good. I thought it was really interesting, but it didn't give me the, oh, I love it, like a 5-star is for me. Like 5 stars are the books that I just love, but I really, really like this one. So you have so much discussion of what these girls are going through and, you know, things about the war. And I was really concerned when I picked this book up that a book written by a man that is about women in the military and his YA would focus too much on relationships, or, you know, since it's YA, or would really show women poorly. And I didn't think that happened at all. I thought the women characters were really well done. I thought war was really well shown. Now, I've never been to war, but I was married to a soldier, and a lot of the things that he said about being a soldier, you know, the vibe, if you will, rang true with this book. Like, it felt very believable to me. The author has a little author's note about some of the research he did and some of the like scenes he depicted that were true from history. And overall, I just had a really good time with this book. I do plan to continue the series, although because it's such a heavy read, not only is it chunky, and it is chunky, although it goes by fairly quickly. It's not like tiny font or anything. It was very readable, but just sometimes like the emotional toll of reading it, I needed a break from it. So, you know, we obviously in part 1, it's mostly the training for the war, but especially when we got into part 2, when the girls are actually experiencing war, it hits you hard. And sometimes I needed to step away from that and be like, okay, let's read something cute and fluffy. So I do plan to read the next book probably soon, but I need at least like one fluff book in between. Otherwise, I think I'm going to have a really hard time, you know, with the emotional part of this, because this is very emotional. It's very difficult what these characters go through, and it's not what I usually read. So while I really enjoyed it, really had a good time, it is so far outside of what I normally read that, you know, I don't want to necessarily just continue this right away. But if you like war stories, if you like strong women characters, this was really excellent in a lot of ways, and I had a really, really good time with it, and I do highly, highly recommend. All right, guys, so those were the World War II books that I've read recently, and I think that is going to be it for this vlog. So please tell me in the comments if there's any World War II books you've read that you could recommend me reading, because I am very interested in this time period. So feel free to leave your recs. Feel free to leave any comments about these books if you've read them, particularly if you've read the other books in this series. Is the rest of the series good? Like I said, really enjoy this, but is the rest good? And then also, if you have any recommendations or ideas for future vlogs, I want to start doing vlogs more frequently, and I would love some ideas of what themes you guys would like to see. So leave all that in the comments below. If you can't think of anything to leave, feel free to leave like a book emoji. You can never go wrong with a book emoji. And please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. This has been Jane. Bye.